Hello and welcome. I'm very honored to introduce my guest to you tonight. Reatha Clark King is with me. We're going to talk about her life, which is an amazing life, and we're going to talk about race relations, which she knows a lot about. So I want to tell you, before I let you talk, Reatha, tell you just a little bit about her. And I think most of you know her name if you've lived in Minnesota very long. She has been here since about
1977.
77.
Yes.
Okay. And we were just talking about her loyalty to Minnesota, which is very strong. But she grew up in Georgia. Her father was a sharecropper. Her mother had a third-grade education. Grew up in a large extended family, though, with lots of love and support. She went to a one-room schoolhouse up through 7th grade that was also in your church. Mm-hmm. She then went on to high school, went from high school right to college in Atlanta, mm-hmm.
Clark College,
yes. Which is now called Clark Atlanta.
That's right.
College. Mm-hmm. She did very, very well in high school and college. And I remember reading, you were so pleased you got 100 on most everything you did.
Yes.
And she said her confidence grew. Mm-hmm. She went then to the University of Chicago, where she got her master's and PhD in chemistry. Mm-hmm. And then went to Columbia and got her MBA later on.
Yes.
But let's go back and talk some about your work history too as we do this. I just want to fill you in. She was a research chemist for the National Bureau of Standards for several years and was literally a rocket scientist. And you helped with the space project in a very direct way, didn't you?
Yes, yes.
Your research was critical.
Yes.
She left that job and went to York College then and became a associate dean eventually in York Colleges in New York. Mm-hmm. Worked there from 68 to 77, and then was called to Minnesota, mm-hmm. and that's 1977, as you were reminding me, and was the president of Metro State University for 10 or 11 years. 11.
Yes.
And then got tapped by Bruce Atwater to come over to General Mills, where you became a vice president eventually and executive director of the foundation.
That's right.
She has now 14 honorary doctorates. She's worked as a board member with some of the major corporations, Exxon, Mobil, H.B. Fuller, Wells Fargo. 25 years, 28 years board loyalty in some of these. And I don't know how you've done it all, but what a life.
Oh, yes, well.
What a life. I want to go back and talk some about growing up, though, as a young girl in the segregated South.
Yeah.
You picked cotton,
yeah.
and that had an influence in your whole work ethic. But just tell the viewers a little bit about what picking cotton was like as a 12-year-old girl.
I'd be glad to, Mary, and I can summarize it first by saying it was hard work and torturous work.
Mm-hmm.
Hot sun. In your introduction, you left out my most important accomplishments. That's 2 sons.
2 very wonderful sons.
Yes. But I have been able to think more positively about the hard work and tough experiences I had growing up, because I'm thinking now in terms of what I gained from that experience, rather than to feel like I was being punished, especially by the state of Georgia, because of the discrimination that my family and I experienced. But what did I learn from that experience? Picking cotton, stringing tobacco. First of all, I learned how to get up early in the morning.
4 a.m. early, right?
4 a.m. early, because we needed to get to the cotton field and pick the cotton while some dew was still on it. As you know, it would weigh more. And that was, so my goal was to pick 200 pounds per day and earn $6 per day.
200 pounds of cotton.
Yes.
I'm trying to envision how many big bags, because cotton doesn't, even with dew on it, doesn't weigh that much.
No, it's lightweight. But we knew that what you could do by noon, when the sun is overhead, you know, and then by mid-afternoon, you know how far you come, what you had accomplished. And I had a motivator too, my oldest sister. She's a year and 7 months older than I am, and she was a better cotton picker than I was, and I was trying to keep up with her. But I had a vision and a dream to one day be able to get better work earning more money, work that was not so harsh, and to be able to help my mother with our expenses. So I had there was some dreams that motivated me. And I realized early on, and we were advised by community people, that we didn't have to endure those difficult circumstances forever, provided we got an education, we studied hard, took advantage of that opportunity, we carried ourselves nicely. The community was pretty much illiterate, but we had some standards that I still love today. And you could earn a good reputation in your community, provided you were friendly to people, not stuck up, that's the way they call it. You were not lazy, and you didn't talk about people behind their backs.
Some very basic, good neighbor
That's
models.
right. Values.
Values.
They were community values. So when people would report back to my parents, your children really are nice, that really made them feel very proud.
And I remember hearing that people in your church said, you've got to get an education and push besides your own mother and grandmother and family.
Yes, there were some guidelines for living that I think back on now is still good today, you know, that love for learning. I'm looking at the young people here in the audience and keep on learning, become a lifelong learner. The love for learning, and that comes naturally with me. I've always been studious, so studious that I didn't tell people often because they call me a bookworm. You quietly learn things and use that knowledge for problem solving. Then the passion for family and passion for church, spiritual life, and these came to me by nature, and I was able to learn. I was able to practice these even before getting formal degrees.
And it sounds like your mother and grandmother were people that practiced those kinds of values too, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
One of the things I heard you say in another interview was that when we see movies about the South and when it was still segregated, you said an interesting thing. You said, I don't think the movies do not portray the fear that we felt as family members just on a daily, weekly basis. And can you describe that and tell us more about that fear that was pervasive and kind of always with you?
Yes. In the Old South, I'll put it that way, before the laws were changed outlawing discrimination, outlawing segregation, separation of the races, we blacks knew that we had to stay in our place or we would get in trouble with the law. So we were taught not to be bold, but instead we were taught not to offend. Now, in that environment, you can offend a lot of people. So that expectation that you're going to stay in your place or you get in trouble with the law, with the policeman or with the people who hired you to work. We were sharecroppers. That instilled anxiety and fear in you, that you had very little, that life would be made harder for you. Mm-hmm. And I have seen the civil rights, the movies that try to portray what life was like in those circumstances, and 12 Years as a Slave, or even the movies Selma. Mm-hmm. I think to myself, they've done a pretty good job with some of the horror moments, but they still don't get that fear part, the fear factor. Mm-hmm.
You said you would lock your doors on Saturday nights, fearing that the police might come looking for someone you might be hiding, fearing that they would use that as an excuse to come break in.
Yes, that was a very difficult time in our country when in the South.
And we're talking the late 40s, early 50s at this point, right?
Mm-hmm. Especially black men, young black men, if they were accused during the day and the word got around that they had offended a white person, and sometimes it would be, it could be misreported even. But the word was spread in the community that Miss So-and-so's son is in trouble with the law, and they're looking for him. They're looking for him. Well, the policeman could just come and search your house, knock on your door, and that incident raised a lot of anxiety in the community.
Sure.
And fear. That's why I come back to that word fear. Living under the cloud of fear based on rumors like that. Mm-hmm. And somebody is in trouble. That was the language that's used. Mm-hmm. And,
so kind of vague, not real specific.
Well, the person being sought was the person in hiding was named specifically.
Okay,
and
but the offense was rather vague. Is that what?
The offense was you didn't know whether it was a concoction or whether it was accurate. Mm-hmm. There was no proof. Mm-hmm. You had no good evidence.
So no way to defend against it if it wasn't true.
That's right. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is you don't know whose door would be knocked on, whose door would be tapped. So everybody was in this state of frenzy that it could be us. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't respond appropriately or respectfully, if your door was knocked on, you would be pulled out and beaten.
And beaten, was that kind of the mode of operation, that young man or person would be beaten?
Well, yeah, it happened to Medgar Evers in Mississippi. That's the way he lost his life. People came and pulled him out and killed him.
That's right.
So there was no protection under the law, none whatsoever. And that was those were different times. So but that's why I said the fear. It's very difficult for Hollywood to get that accurate.
Yes,
based on experience.
I'm learning just hearing you tell us about this. We need to hear more about that. I want to just mention one other sort of historical thing in terms of your early days, and then I want to ask you some things about race relations right now. And I wish we had more time, but when you went away to college, your mother, I remember, said, be sure you go to the back of the bus, Reatha.
That's right.
And there was no doubt in your mind that you would do that, right? Mm-hmm. What did that feel like? Were you questioning that as a young, bright, college-bound woman?
I did not question it at all because that's what the law required. I was 16 years old, and I was going from Moultrie, Georgia to Atlanta, Georgia, about 200 miles on the Trailway bus. And so I, just as my mother instructed me, took my foot locker, which was what college students travel with, and the bus driver put it on the bus, and then I went to the back of the bus and took my seat. That is, so the Trailway bus was our usual way of getting from Moultrie to Atlanta for all of $4.35, about that then. And but seating on the bus is what was segregated. So it was not until Rosa Parks challenged that system that change came, as you know. But I didn't think anything about following the law.
So it's acceptance of the standards at the time, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, I want to ask some reactions about today, because we're in a tough time. We are taping right now on August 1st of 2016.
That's right.
And Joe Klein had an editorial in Time magazine, and he actually quoted Newt Gingrich, who said, and I want to get your reaction, if you are a normal white American, the truth is you don't understand being black in America. Do you think that's correct? Would you say, yes, that is very true?
The level of understanding varies from one white person to the next, and I'll explain the exception I have in mind. But I think he was saying too that instinctively, whites probably would not understand the experience that blacks have, that total experience, I would say, instinctively, because to be honest with you, it's very difficult to live in somebody else's shoes, to have that same experience.
No matter the color, no matter the gender, no matter the age.
That's right. And it's very, experience is difficult to transfer. But one example of what he's talking about might be something that happened in our family, fairly highly educated black family with two sons, and inside the home, we would actually instruct our sons on how to behave when they were out in the community so they wouldn't get in trouble with the police.
If you get pulled over,
yes,
what to do, etc., right?
And that is a concern of most middle-class black families who have sons. And we deal with it inside the home. But my colleagues at General Mills or on my corporate boards probably unaware that I'm counseling my sons like that in this day and age. Now their age is 47 and 50. Oh, they don't think, there's no problem with that. And I don't counsel them because they say, Mom, you're always worrying. You know, that would be the reaction.
What moms do?
Yeah, but several years past, when they were in their teen years, moms typically didn't go to sleep until the sons came home.
I bet.
Because there was that anxiety about possibly they would get in trouble and say the wrong thing. That's what we caution
things
about.
have not changed in that regard, have they much?
I think they have.
Do you?
To a great degree, because many law enforcement agencies have picked up on the need for police-community relations. That covers a lot. Police-community relations. Even the city of Dallas was commended on how hard they had worked on that. But at the same time, the trauma surgeon who dealt with the injured police who were brought there, he was an African American. He talked openly about being in the hospital and then how he behaves when he gets in the community.
And has some fears,
and
am I right, in the
I would say
outside world?
Anxieties.
Okay.
There is sort of an uneasy truce. Uneasy.
That's a good phrase.
I think the word there is uneasy. We have not gotten to where we want to be until we can erase that feeling of uneasiness. And now, I have, my husband and I talked openly with our children about this, but we can say, not only, we can use the word uneasy and feel very confident doing it.
You're not overstating it, are you?
No, I'm not over, but there's lack of trust between some parts of the population and law enforcement and other parts. And that lack, until we can have the community relations accomplish the objectives to the point where there's trust, like between you and me, and my colleagues at General Mills and myself, that trust is a heavy-duty word, and we have to raise the trust level. Word. Yeah.
Black Lives Matter, it's getting as a title for the group, the organization, a lot of analysis, a lot of criticism, a lot of support. How do you feel about Black Lives Matter as a movement?
I feel that I understand it quite well. I don't agree with all the tactics. And we have that intergenerational imperative that's working within the black race, just like we have working in most races. One generation will feel the same way as another, but their tactics for solving the problem will be different. Yes. But some are very uneasy with the label Black Lives Matters. Now, I understand why there's that label more than most, because I know the legacy of problems that the people who like that label, Black Lives Matter, what they're focusing on when they say black. And then that causes some uneasiness. Some people will see it as, and I've heard them call it racist. Well, if you give it the context of drawing on the legacy, they're causing people to be anxious and concerned that they're going to be discriminated against because of their blackness.
Because of color.
Then they're going to hitch on to black. But then others will say, well, all lives matter. And that's perfectly right.
Sure.
All lives matter.
Sure.
Then we saw in the conventions, one of the conventions said blue lives matter. I knew exactly the context they had, where they were coming from.
Right.
So there will be different levels of understanding and acceptance around that activist theme, Black Lives Matter, depending on your level of understanding of why the black is there and what the activists are referring to, what makes them uncomfortable as they consider the risk they feel because of their blackness.
Because of color.
Now that's a good word to consider too. Some people feel at risk because of their color, their blackness. And I would feel less at risk than some people, but it's possible that I would make some people feel uneasy until they get to know that I'm harmless to them.
And as a woman, there is less risk probably, in all parts of society in terms of color-related discrimination and issues. I want to move just, and there's maybe disagreement with my comment, but I want to move to a couple ideas. We only have a couple minutes left.
Okay, I'm sorry to talk so much.
No. I've loved everything you've said. Has been wonderful. But I want to ask you, if we just had a couple things in our country to focus on to improve race relations, what would you urge us to focus on as a country, as a state, as a community?
Oh, yes. And we have just a couple of minutes.
We have just a couple of minutes, so I need
I think we have
summary here. And I'll have you back maybe when we can go into this in more detail.
I think we have, the agenda is very clear to me right now, as I think someone quoted President Reagan as saying, it's morning in America. This is the time to look ahead, and things are going to be better if we make them better. This is an opportunity for us. I think we need a dialogue and conversation across racial lines to understand how we function. We have a wonderful, diverse community in terms of diversities of races and ethnicities, but we don't quite understand well enough how we function between the races and within a kind of race. That's like I was talking about the conversation in the home. So this is an opportunity now for us to have those conversations and dialogues so we can lower that level of anxiety.
So talk more, listen more, both, right?
Talk more, listen more, and act more.
And act more too. That's
very
key,
important.
isn't it?
But then closing the education and economic gap across races, I would put it this way, Mary, there's work for everybody here. The school system, the teachers, the policymakers, the parents, and I think the leadership of our communities have to understand and make clear to our communities that it's no sense blaming somebody else. You just do your role. There's work for you to do, parents especially. And for parents who don't know how to help their children, let's have parents' academies to teach them how. And
parenting is hard work, isn't it?
It's hard, and it's permanent work. It's permanent work. But I think we have this opportunity now for every organization, churches, foundations, philanthropic foundations, and nonprofit organizations, corporations, to make multicultural understanding amongst its employees and people real work. I mean, actively work on that. And I think then we'll get more understanding across racial lines.
Well, on that thoughtful note, we need to close. I need to have you back. I want to have you back. If you will come back and we'll expound more, or I will ask you to expound more on some of these ideas. Because we're out of time now.
Thank you.
But the words risk, trust, fear, communication, all words I want to talk more about.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much, Reatha, for
thank you.
being here and sharing your story and wonderful ideas. Thank you for being with us. I'll see you next week. Until then, have a good week.